Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we are on episode 214, and we're going to be talking a little bit about bomb-proofing. And no, we don't mean the bomb-proofing like you would do if you lived in a war-torn country. We mean more like your campsite, when you get there and you get set up, you should have everything where it needs to be, where you know where it is, and if some weather blew in or something like that, you know, you wandered off from your site to go fishing, if there was a downpour, sudden gust of wind, something like that, your campsite's gonna kind of stay where it is. Or if you leave during the day and you come back at night, you know where everything is, so you're not stumbling around looking for it at night. We didn't coin the term bomb-proofing, and honestly, I didn't know that this whole thing had a term to it. It was actually recently one of the books that my wife had gotten me while we were out. This backpacking book. I like these little things, these comically created outdoorsy books, because there's usually decent tidbits of information in them, you know what I mean? And they give them to you in a humorous thing. As long as you know how to sort out the good information, these things are great. And we came to this topic, and you know what? Once again, I'd heard this term before, completely forgot about it, reread it in here, and I was like, oh, it has a term. And that's kind of where it led me to talk to Ben there, and off we went for this topic. So, that being said, Ben, why don't you tell us your favorite way of setting up camp and bomb-proofing? Because everybody kind of has their own thing. And I think what we're going to find with this episode is it's going to be a bunch of suggestions more than the best way.
Yeah, so, I mean, and I'm going somewhat off the description you gave me from the beginning, and when we started, something flew off my chair, so I'm afraid it's going to completely collapse on me here. But
could be the most entertaining episode ever.
It's when you get to the site, the last thing you want to be is rummaging through every piece of gear trying to find anything. So like trying to organize your gear in such a way that you can get to what you want and when you need it and how you can properly do it. And so there's a couple of methods I really like to use. And first one is when I get things more or less set up, everything has a place. So for example, all my stuff sacks, and so many things have a stuff sack, go into one stuff sack and get put at the bottom of my bag so that I don't have to go looking for them later. Because there's nothing worse than when you're trying to put everything away at the end of the trip and not being able to find the stuff sack for your sleeping bag, your liner, your pillow, your whatever, right? Like the tent itself or the hammock. So I try to put all those in one location. My gear within my bag is usually grouped with like stuff. So I usually have a couple of, again, sort of stuff sacks, but I have a bag for all my kitchen gear. So when I grab that kitchen bag gear, I know what it is just by the feel, look, touch. I can pull that out and put it aside. That usually stays in one area of the camp. All my kitchen stuff is then where it needs to be. All my clean clothes is usually in one bag, and I usually have something to sort of put the dirty clothes in because I don't like the two to contaminate. So I have a spare bag that stuff goes on. And I'll sort of throw this out there. If something's been worn, but I don't consider it so dirty that it needs to be put in the dirty bag, it kind of just goes in the pack. So I have clean, dirty, and somewhere in between. But I think it's really important that everything have a place. Make sure you're always putting your axe or your knife, all these things consistently in the same place. Otherwise, you're going to be looking for this stuff. And there's nothing that quite ruins a trip, like spending the whole trip looking for something, or when you leave, not being able to find something, because it'll sit on your mind. It'll sit on your mind for days and weeks sometimes. You knew you had it when you left, and all of a sudden now you don't have it anymore. Where did it go? What happened to it?
I have a missing knife that I still look for every single time I go to a specific camping spot. I know I'm not going to find it, but I can't help myself from just taking at least 10-15 minutes out of my trip to give a glance where I'm pretty sure I know where I dropped it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. And, it is extremely annoying.
So from your description, a takeaway from this is it should be methodical. Don't just go to every campsite all willy-nilly and say, oh, this is how I'm going to set this one up this time. Yes, I understand it has to change a little bit and adapt to the surroundings, but you should have a general idea of how you do stuff and how you lay stuff out. Now, that being said, Steve, one of our regulars here, he had posted a comment on the Facebook page and he laid it out what his method is, and this is kind of the thought process. So, for him, when he lands on site, first thing is safety items. Handles the lighting, tent flashlights, lighters, proper footwear, and depending on where you're at, that might be your knife, your bear spray, your firearms, your perimeter warnings, whatever, right? Your safety-related items. Then his convenience items, so he locates and places them. Things like toilet paper, drinking water, his hoodie if it starts to get cold, plug-in electronics, and their portable battery chargers or whatever. That way, if he needs that stuff, he's not digging for it as he needs it. He knows where it's at. After that, deal with food items away from camp. So if you're going to prepare some food or something like that, depending on where you're at, you may want to do that away from your camp, especially if you've been fishing or something like that. You don't want to clean fish right at your campsite. So you deal with all that stuff. And that way, not just the meal that you're potentially eating right there, as what we have a habit of doing, it's a great time to set up your future meals too, especially breakfast. Because when you're camping, you don't always want to crawl out of bed and have to do the whole process of cooking. If it's already half set up and all you have to do is heat it up, that's even better. Last thing he does there is sort out the campfire, firewood, and all that stuff. The main point of that was, once again, he has a method. He knows where his stuff is going to be. He knows how he likes to set it out. He can tailor that to the location he's at, because that may change if he's in an open field, or if he's in dense brush, or if he's in rocky terrain. Priorities may change a little bit, but the thing is, he has an idea of how he wants to set that up. Myself, when I go in, my method's a little different. I generally sit down. I take care of my firewood first. Usually first time when I blow in, actually, let me back up. I actually unpack first, set up shelter. And that's the thing. I generally unpack the majority of my bag when I get there. And I take it out in sections. You know what I mean? So I'll take out my clothing section, such as you mentioned. I'll take out my cooking section. And I take out my shelter section, because that's generally how I break my bag down. Cooking includes water and stuff like that for anybody that's aware. And then I'll have my personals or toiletries, and I kind of leave that in the bag. That way it just doesn't end up all over the forest floor. Once I set up the shelter and stuff, then I move on to firewood. Then I'll tend to the other things. But I have a very specific way I set everything up. My kit bag is never just thrown on the ground. You and I, we have this thing, we hang our kit bags. It's usually up about chest height, eye height. If you need to open it and look into it, you can. You know what I mean? Headlamp. Generally, even if it's daylight, but if I'm going to go out somewhere, I'll put my headlamp on and I wear it around my neck, which not everybody will agree with. That's fine. It's just what I happen to do, and then I never have to go looking for it. I never have to walk back, look for the headlamp. Knife, always on my hip. And this sounds like, oh, come on, guys, this is the way we all camp. But the reality is, this is how we all think we camp. It's not until you get the experience that you do set it out methodically and you do it, you find your own rhythm. And it's not so important as to what that rhythm is, so long as it works for you and it's repeatable. Does that make any kind of sense, Ben?
Yes. Well, this is it. It's what you do becomes habit forming. And the good thing about habit forming is once you do it, it becomes pretty consistent. Now, when you break that habit, that's when you can sometimes come into problems. But if it's an emergency and you need to get stuff, or you need to get out quick, or knowing where everything is going to make it much, much easier. And it takes the stress off of it, right? If you know where things are. Like at home, you have the same thing, right? Your dishes always go in the same cupboard, same drawers. You wouldn't just willy-nilly choose new cupboards and new drawers, right? You put your clothes away the same place every time. So when you need to go find your clothes, it's always in the closet. It's always in the dresser. We do the same thing. And like you said, it sounds like common sense, but the reality is some people get out there and they get a little lackadaisy with it. Well, it's only for a couple hours. It's only for a night. But here's the thing. If you're going to do it regularly, it brings that sense of home to it too, right? You're like, okay, I know where I put this stuff, and it'll be easier to find. And it also means set up and take down is easier. People with OCD can't help it. If you ever camp with an OCD person, like even if you do it out of order, it'll drive them nuts. But the reality is, even those without a OCD really can use that organization to help make sure to making the best of it. It doesn't take that much work. Think about each thing you do, though, because if you're going to do this, do it right from the start. If you allow it to form haphazardly and say, well, I always put it there, and you don't really question why, maybe you're putting stuff in not the best spot. I don't know if you're into Six Sigma and things like that. There are more efficient ways to do things, right? But need a little bit of flexibility to allow you to deal with site to site, right? You may not always have the tree to hang your kit from, so now you have to have an alternate plan. In that case, maybe it stays in a vehicle, or maybe it stays in the vestibule of your tent. Have a couple of plan Bs, because not always can you go with the best practice. But.
So just to address one question there, Chris Loveless just joined us here. He missed the first part of it, and he's just curious what we're talking about with bomb-proofing. So to break it down super quick, Chris, bomb-proofing is just getting your camp set up in such a manner that if something went awry, you know where your stuff is, and make it consistent and methodical. As Ben just kind of alluded to there, or actually you didn't allude to it, you said it straight up, it creates a sense of home, it creates a sense of security, it creates a sense of comfort when you know where your stuff is. And he used the analogy like you put your stuff away in your house, which is perfect. You can pretty much come into your house. If you were blindfolded, you could, fumble your way around the house. You'd be off by a few inches here and there, but you would be surprised how easy you could walk around your own house and find the things that you were looking for. Same kind of idea to take to a campsite. The problem with a campsite is its layout changes depending on where you are. So now the consistency has to be on how you keep your items. If you take your knife out of the sheath and use it, don't just jam it in a log and walk away. Put it back in the sheath. You know what I mean? Make sure you know where your cook stuff goes and how to get to it. That way, if you did leave your campsite during the day, you come back at night, say you want to make a cup of tea, you're not just dumping your entire bag out in your tent, or if you're hammock camping, on the forest floor or wherever you happen to be, rooting around looking for your stuff and then trying to figure it out. Because this is how a lot of people do things. And I've taken people into the woods that literally say, I'm just going to leave stuff into my bag until I need it. Why unpack it? Maybe I won't need it. You know what I mean? It's that much less effort. And I understand where they're coming from. The problem becomes, if you didn't unpack it, do you really need to take it? And this is coming from a guy that takes a lot of crap. You know what I mean? I pack heavy. And that's also why I tend to unpack my bag and put everything where it needs to be. And the beauty of putting stuff where, it's assigned location is, once again, if you do wander away from camp or whatever, or if you're at camp and the weather changes drastically. Here in Nova Scotia, we have this time of year, just yesterday, day before, we had like 18 degrees. But a week prior to that, we were still at minus 15. Like, there's big temperature swings. And this can still happen today. Like, it's fairly warm. It's 4 degrees out. But if I woke up this morning and everything was frozen, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, this is such a drastic thing. I'd be like, Nova Scotia weather. You know what I mean? So you want to know where your stuff is because it's a safety thing. And this is where a lot of people, I think, miss the mark. They don't realize how much of your safety goes in to knowing where your stuff is and consistently knowing where your stuff is and where it's going to be.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of made a good point there. Like, if you came into your house with the lights out, you could still probably find everything. You could get back to your campsite at night and it'd be too dark. Or you could do something and injure your eyes and not be able to see. In this winter, you could end up with snow blindness. There's plenty of reasons you would come back and not be able to potentially see what's going on. Some more long-term, some less long-term. The ability to get back and locate the important things quickly, because you consistently know where you keep things. So if you find your tent, you know that usually you keep your bag just in front of the tent hung on a tree. Now you know that you probably don't have to go far to get that. If you always keep your first aid kit in your bag but in the front pocket, you'll be able to find it. Having to search for that stuff, if you always put it in a different pocket, means you may not find it when you absolutely need it the most, right?
And we are talking, those are very, I don't want to say extreme because they're very potential hazards, but it can be as simple as your toilet paper. If you just half-heartedly throw your toilet paper into your bag, you eat something that didn't agree with you on your trip in, be it something out of your pack, something you picked up off the trail, you didn't properly identify those berries or something like that, It can be a real struggle when you got to dig through your pack to find your toilet paper before you ruin your drawers. You know what I mean? And it's kind of funny, but it's true.
Well, and it comes down to even packing. Like, how often have you been like, out the door and you got in the back of your head, did I pack this? Did I pack that? If everything has a place in your pack, the likelihood of forgetting something when you leave. So that's where the bomb-proofing coming from the beginning. You are more assured to have everything you need when you leave if you've taken the time to put everything in its place and then recover it at a reasonable time frame. So that's how it works, right? Building a plan, sticking to the plan, putting things away in the same way. It means that it's going to go smoother. And it's really important if you have to get out of there quick and you want to pack up all your gear and get the hell out of there. Find out there's a rainstorm coming or somebody calls up and there's an emergency, you need to get home and it's starting to get dark. All that stuff could make it easier. Those are, worst case scenarios. But even on the best case scenario, and you stay as long as you can. It's a beautiful day. You wait till the last minute to leave, and then you're trying to pack everything up. You can just go in and say, boom, I know where everything is. I can pack up. And you'll get very consistent in what you do because you consistently put everything in the same place. It's going to take you a consistent amount of time to get it up. So you'll know how long it takes to come and go, right?
No, and Steve just said here from the side, even TP at 3 a.m., better to know where it is. His TP is always with the hand sanitizer and the headlamp when I'm going to sleep. Much like I do, if I have a headlamp, sometimes I'll snap that around the toilet paper and set that in a spot so I know it's all right there to go. Once again, sounds foolish. These are the things you learn after being in the woods for a long period of time without the toilet paper. But this also goes not just from setting up your camp, and we've already kind of said this a little bit. When you're packing your bag, always kind of pack your stuff in the same way once you find what works for you and how you unpack, and this will get into how you set up and all that stuff, because then when you're repacking it, it's really easy to self-identify what's missing.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Same.
So
leaving home, going back, same thing. Did I leave my sleeping bag in the woods? Right? Because I had to pack everything the right way, and I remember I packed this behind this on top of this. This goes there. This is how you get everything in your bag. And if you don't have a plan of how to pack your bag and you pack heavy like me and Robert do, then everything's not fitting in. Like, there is one way our bags go together, and any other way is a failure.
pretty much. And you laugh about leaving the sleeping bag in the woods. I have camped with people that have forgotten their tents in the woods. Typically, they're people that generally sleep with hammocks. Decided to go tent camping. They packed it up. It's a fairly small thing. They set it down. They grab their bag. They throw it on, leave the tent right there, and walk away. It happens. You know what I mean? Of course, you can walk back in and get the tent. Hopefully, you're not too far away by the time you figure it out. But it's true. And if you're covering 14 kilometers in a day and realize at the end of the 14 kilometers, that's when you forgot something important like the keys to your car, that's going to make for either a very awkward phone call or a very long night that you weren't expecting to spend in the woods staring at your car.
So, funny story about that. We were doing a trip one time, and the trip was, we left one vehicle at the top, and we drove another vehicle and put it down at the bottom so we could drive back up. So the guy with the vehicle left at the bottom left his keys at the top. So when we get to the bottom, I looked at the guy and he said, well, how are we getting back? And I'm like, we're taking your vehicle. He said, well, I left my keys at your vehicle. and I looked at him and like, what were you thinking? He said, well, I didn't want him to get wet. Like, this was the reason we left one. You never did get it. So sometimes it's people just don't think things 100% through, right? Smart guy, not so smart incident.
And this is where you get into the the methodology of things. The more you do it, the more it becomes habit, as we said at the start. So this was probably their first time in this situation. They learned from it. I can guarantee you the next time around, before you traverse the down, their question was probably asked, are we taking my vehicle when we get to the end, or can I leave my keys here? I mean, these all sound like silly little situations, but they're the situations that just cause a thorn in your side. You know what I mean? And they're completely avoidable. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say one more thing. If you're camping with somebody new, this is extremely important. If you're camping with somebody new, explain everything you're doing. Identify everything you do. So I went camping with a guy a little while ago, a knowledgeable fellow. He's camped a few times. We talked before we left and said, okay, I'm going to bring these things. You're going to bring these things. We had a plan. That night, before we got into our respective areas, he said, this is the bear spray. I am putting it here by the door. If we need it, it is here. He was very clear about where he put that. There was 4 or 5 other items that we said, okay, if you need it, this will be here. We clearly identified this. There's a name for that. It's like naming places or something. It's just awful.
See, once again, I know these things have terms. I don't know them. They're things that we do and we take for granted sometimes. And this even extends to our significant others. When Melissa and I go camping, anything that's important, we verbally say out loud where it is. Even though we know that's where it's going to be, it's almost like our checklist of knowing that it's been set up. So even if you're out by yourself, sometimes just saying it out loud, one, gives you a little comfort from hearing another voice, depending on how long you've been gone. And those people that are saying, oh, you're talking to yourself, you're going crazy, they haven't been in the woods long enough to realize that sometimes you need to talk to yourself just to work problems out. You can do it in your head all the times, but sometimes saying the words helps the process. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know.
You're definitely crazy.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't be sane and want to run into the woods and stay there for any extended period of time. I think we're all a little crazy in that aspect, but that's a good crazy.
But anyways, I don't know, 22 minutes. I think you could probably wrap it up.
This was going to be a quicker episode, ladies and gentlemen. It was just kind of a touch topic. But anyway, I did want to say a couple comments from the side here. I always like to include the comments from our listeners here. So we have Steve again. For people who haven't been camping or haven't been camping a lot, when it's dark at night, it's a new kind of dark. If you haven't experienced the kind of dark where you're out in the woods and there's no residual light, it's interesting, especially if it's cloud covered. And people don't realize, they'll say like, oh, I'm in my home, the lights are out, it's dark. You would be surprised at the residual light that comes out from your house, from even like your microwave, the light on it, your stove might have a clock on it, you might have power lights that illuminate little parts of your house, like my TV has a red light that never goes off even when the thing's turned off. But these all add things. But being out in the middle of the woods, especially if it's dense forest and it's cloudy, your hand can literally be here and you might not see the silhouette of it. Like, it is dark. And Red Sand Adventures, Danny, another tip he said was for them late night, bathroom runs, sometimes it's good to pre-dig some spots. And I have actually done this method. If I went in and I ran into some intestinal trouble that I didn't plan on, but realized that I had gotten to that situation, then I kind of set myself up for the night.
Steve McDonald's mentioning keys. He treats them like his first aid kit. A lot of people, believe it or not, will even take the second set of keys and have mounted permanently on the side of their vehicle, like those little magnetic protective things. And even us, like when we went camping with the motorcycles, we never took the keys to the campsite. Like, I don't know if we've ever talked about that.
No.
We chose a location, and both of us hid our keys in a very safe location, a fixed distance away from the vehicles. I won't say how far or where, because we may use a similar method again. But rather than take them in and risk losing them at the campsite or on the trail, we left them close to the vehicle, but not so close that if someone tried to steal the vehicles, it would be an easy thing for them to do. Because you don't know what's going to happen. You could lose your pack. You could lose your clothes. I mean, it's happened to people. And it's as strange as it sounds, people have fallen in the water, lost a ton of shit, and never been able to recover it. So for us, it meant that if we went in and we lost absolutely everything we took into the woods, we'd still come back and be able to start the bikes out and drive. Now, we'd be looking a little silly, but...
Yeah, but we could do it. On that story as well, we hid our keys in separate locations from each other, like I said, at a predetermined distance away from the motorcycles. We also left our helmets in a different location away from the keys. That way, if somebody did stumble in and they found one set of keys, For whatever reason, they're only getting one bike. They weren't sitting together. If they found one helmet, they weren't stealing both helmets. And these items being separated gives a smaller footprint to be able to be seen from somebody passing by. If somebody happened to go down this old woods road we were on, for which I have no idea why they ever would, but if they did, they might see the two bikes, but that's all they're going to see, and they might just look and wander off. But if they happen to see the two bikes, then, in the bush over there, they see a red object, because my helmet was red. They might be over and investigate that, and then they find the whole works of it, and now your stuff is gone. So this is just extra security, but it's, once again, it's part of the methodology, whatever the word is I'm looking for here. It's part of the process. So that was something we agreed upon when we got there. We had a little discussion. We just talked about it really quickly. I think it was me that asked you. I was like, are you taking your keys in? And you're like, no. I'm like, good, I'm not either. And we kind of went our opposite ways, put our stuff in different locations, and we're like, cool. So worst case, if, something went to hell and we got airlifted out, you know what I mean? Whatever the case may be, we can call somebody up and be like, our bikes are here. Go these specific directions and you will find the keys. From there, go this specific directions, you'll find the helmets. Can you bring that stuff back to us? You know what I mean?
Right. But yeah, I mean, there's a risk anytime you go into woods, and minimizing those risks is a big one. And keys are a big one. I would hate to ever lose my keys and not be able to get home. So I've always treated that with a certain level of respect. Especially if I'm canoeing or kayaking or anything like that, because keys, most of them are electronic now, and I don't know how much they would survive submersion or impact damage. So just try to avoid that.
And this stuff falls right into bomb-proofing, because like you said, say you're on a canoe trip, you overturned, lost everything. You know what I mean? There's still a fallback plan.
Not it'd be worse to get back to your vehicle and that can't still do nothing, right? So.
And I'll mention this. I wasn't going to bother because it's not every vehicle, but my vehicle, for instance, I got one of the newer Ford Rangers, and love them or hate them, that's irrelevant. That's a topic for another discussion. But my vehicle can open through cell phone. If you pair your cell phone up, you can actually take the keys, throw it in the vehicle, lock it up, and as you're coming up, you can unlock it with a cell phone. And a lot of people have said, well, why don't you just do that? Because I'm an advocate for a second set of keys. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a big believer in have a second set of keys, even if they don't start the vehicle, as long as they can open it, then you're laughing. And then you can leave your, whatever inside, blah, 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 blah. I'm still not a big fan of leaving the keys in the vehicle, because then all it takes is one swift elbow, knock the window out, and bam, you have everything you need to drive away, and you're into it for replacing a $200 window for a $35,000 vehicle. You know what I mean? So I don't like leaving stuff in the car.
And most keys now are proximity keys, so they don't even need to be in ignition.
And that's why I tend to move them away from the vehicle, because a lot of people, I hate this one, they hide them in the fuel cap. First place somebody looks if they're going to steal your car is on the top of the wheels, in the fuel cap, or along the rails that run along the side of the car, because those are the big places that everybody hides them. You know what I mean? And what's that?
Or the hitch.
Yeah. And these are classic spots. That's why I'm an advocate for you move them away from the vehicle, put them in some sort of watertight case, bag, whatever, and just hide that somewhere. Secure it. You don't want something running off with that either. Don't use your grocery bag that just had food remnants in it either. I mean, I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but you never know. I'm sure somebody somewhere said, oh, I'm going to hide this in my trail mix bag and throw it over here in the bushes, and some squirrel ran off with the whole works of it. You know what I mean?
100%. Pros take everything.
Well, that's the thing. If it's shiny, it's gone.
So those are some tips of, what do you do with gear? How do you protect yourself from this stuff?
And yeah, this isn't like I said, this isn't going to be a long discussion here tonight, folks. This is going to be one of our shorter ones, but it's a very important one. It's a very overlooked function of the camp setup and tear down. It's just security. At the end of the day, it's nothing more than security. To me, that's what it is anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, I have a lot to add. I'm kind of happy with it.
Yeah, like I said, wasn't supposed to be a long topic, just a quickie. And sometimes we do that, Not usually. Usually we're so long-winded. Now, that being said, I'm curious to you folks out there, because we have a little bit of time. What's Steve saying here? Have forethought, be methodical. Exactly. It's you ever hear that saying, there's no such thing as common sense, only acquired knowledge? It's something I used to like, and that's kind of what this is. Everybody say, oh, that's common sense stuff. Well, you know what? It's not common sense until you've done it. Like, there is no such thing as common sense that you just inherently have. Somebody has to explain it to you. You have to have learned a lesson at some point where things went bad or good to get that common sense. So I like to say there's acquired knowledge, and hopefully this, 30-minute little rant was enough to acquire the knowledge that you'll think about it. And that's all this was.
You've never gone into a mall and left your keys near the car in case you lost them in a mall, right? You don't go to work and leave them out in the parking lot somewhere in case, you forget them in work. These are not things you think of, right? This is different, right? But you're now going in the woods 2 or 3 days in, and you don't know what's going to happen. Maybe you get separated from all your gear, and now you're walking out, but you manage to find a trail, and you're like, do I go back to find my gear, or do I go to my vehicle and just say, hell with it, I'm getting home?
It gives you a secondary option. Or if you go out with several people, you all took one vehicle, what happens if somebody gets separated from the group? Maybe they make it back to the vehicle, and that now becomes their lifeline for the night. You know what I mean? If one person has the keys.
Yeah.
So, any case, just get the old creative juices flowing there, folks. Think about what's going to work good for you, not only with the pack up to go in, but the unpacking while you're there, and then the repack to come home. This doesn't stop at one process. This is an ongoing thing, you know what I mean? And when you get back and you unpack your gear again, I have a very methodical way that I do that. How I clean my stuff, how I take it out, air it out, whatever you want to call it. Like, I have the upkeep and a system in there too. It just keeps going.
And don't be afraid to consider like a continuous improvement idea to it. If something isn't working, sit down and think, why isn't it working, and what would be a better method? But then, like, define that method and do it, and consistently do that. So it's okay to change and say, okay, I've been hanging my bag, but 3 or 4 times now it's rained and my bag got wetter than I wanted. So now you're going to come up with a different plan. Maybe you're hanging your bag, but you're putting the waterproof bag over the top. Maybe something that simple, right? There's lots of ways to improve a method. It makes the decision, is it worth it? But
anyway, yeah, I think that's good for this topic for tonight. Just for, an Atlantic Bushcraft quickie. I guess on the trail end of this, how have people been liking the interview episodes that we've been doing? I've gotten some feedback on them, but then the last 1 or 2, I haven't got a lot back. Are you folks enjoying that kind of stuff? It's definitely something that we can look into doing more. Our reasoning for doing it was, Bushcraft is a community. We like sharing the experiences with other community members and hearing their experiences. And we do have a list of other people that we could potentially contact to come on the show, but only if you folks want to go down that route. Are we going to exclusively become interviewers? Probably not, but I think it might add a little bit into this.
yeah.
So, yeah, if you folks have any insight on that, definitely shoot us a message. You can get us on all the social media platforms down there. Just a quick message. Hey, yeah, like the interviews, like to see more, or nope, they were dumb ideas. Please don't bring anybody else on. We think they went good. We enjoyed talking to these people, but I mean, we're also doing this for you folks out there, so let us know what you like, and we'll try to do more of that. I do see some people poking up here in the comments, so I'm not ignoring you folks. Jacob, Danny, thanks for chiming in. They say they like them, but I do know a lot of our listeners are exclusively on the listening side. They don't join the live shows here. So this is kind of more tailored to you folks out there. And if you are only on the listening side, we do highly encourage you to flip over to the live side of things here. We do go live on Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. On YouTube, but you can find that from our Facebook page. You can jam in Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures on YouTube. You can look up, Bushcrafting Podcast, and all the information will come up there. Because I do know, looking through the analytics on our stuff, that a lot of the listeners they don't come back over to the live side. And I don't know if it's because of our lack of mentioning it on the live side or if it's just because that's the preferred method. But I'm inviting you folks to come in, join us. If nothing else, you can have a good laugh at how Ben and I look and carry on here, because you are literally seeing two Canadian rednecks spew out on a camera. You're missing all the fun, folks.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's it for me for here tonight. Ben, was there any closing thoughts you had?
No, same as always. Get out there, have fun. Let us know how it goes. Show us your setup. Show us how you do it if you're so willing.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Why don't we have the first, I don't know, I don't want to say challenge, but request.
Yeah.
Lots of you folks out there that listen to us, we know you have cell phones. Do like a quick 30-second clip. Or just a couple pictures and send to us. We'd love to look at your stuff. We don't criticize. If you want suggestions, by all means ask. Otherwise, we just enjoy seeing this stuff. People from different environments, locations, backgrounds, they all have their own flair on everything they do. And part of being in the bushcraft community is you can look at that, appreciate it, and learn from it. We've said it numerous times, Ben. We are not experts. We're just a couple of guys that enjoy going into the woods and hope people can learn from our mistakes more than anything.
Everyone I've ever gone out has had some piece of gear that I haven't seen before, I haven't tried, or was using it in a manner that I hadn't thought of. You know, sometimes I take up and do it myself, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, it was neat, but it's not for me. So, yeah, love to see your setup.
All right, folks. Have a good night. We'll see you next week. Same Atlantic time, same Atlantic channel.